In this video, we're going to talk about a character from the Bible who is little known, and many people don't even know he is mentioned. He appears very briefly in the biblical text, with only 2 verses dedicated to him. Even so, what is reported about him is something incredible. This man managed to defeat 600 Philistines using only a farming tool and liberated Israel. Sometimes people confuse his story with that of Samson, but they did not live in the same era, and aside from both having been judges of Israel, there is no other connection between them. If you still don't know who I'm talking about, his name is Shamgar, the 3rd judge of Israel. This video is based on what is written in the book of Judges, chapter 3, verse 31, and chapter 5, verse 6. The idea is to present the story of Shamgar to those who have never heard of him, and to help those who already know about him to better understand the context in which he lived, his achievements, and the lessons we can draw from his brief appearance in the Bible. To understand the story of Shamgar, it's important to know a little more about the period in which he lived. He was part of the era of the Judges, a time marked by much instability and disorder in Israel. This period began right after the death of Joshua and happened before Israel had a king. The Bible, in the book of Judges, chapter 21, verse 25, describes well what the situation was like. In those days, there was no king in Israel. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. This verse shows how there was a lack of strong leadership and unity among the tribes of Israel, which resulted in a repetitive cycle of problems. The people would turn away from God, fall into idolatry, and then God would allow enemies to attack them as a form of judgment. When the people repented and asked God for help, he raised a judge, a leader, to save them from oppression. This cycle is very clear in the book of Judges. The people abandoned God, suffered at the hands of their enemies, repented, and God sent someone to liberate them. During this time, the Israelites frequently worshipped other gods, which resulted in wars reaching their cities. It is interesting to note that God chose unexpected judges, like Deborah, Gideon, and Shamgar, which demonstrated his grace in the midst of chaos and his ability to use unlikely people to fulfill his purposes. The Bible tells us that Shamgar's main confrontation was against the Philistines. These Philistines were frequent enemies of Israel in the Old Testament, especially during the time of the Judges and up until the reign of David. They were known as a warrior people and for having more advanced technology, as they used iron in their weapons, which gave them a military advantage over the Israelites. The Philistines lived in the coastal region of Canaan and frequently invaded the territory of the tribes of Israel, attacking, stealing, and oppressing the people. The oppression of the Philistines during the time of Shamgar was part of an ongoing conflict between the Israelites and their pagan neighbors. The problem was that the tribes of Israel were not united, which worsened the situation. Each tribe tried to defend itself alone, and with so little cooperation among them, the Philistines and other enemies took advantage of this weakness. It was in this complicated scenario that God chose Shamgar to be a judge and leader, someone different in a period full of problems. Although little is known about Shamgar, it seems that he was a somewhat different judge from the others. Unlike Gideon, Samson, or Deborah, the Bible does not say that Shamgar was directly called by God or that he received specific instructions to liberate Israel. Perhaps this happened, but it is not recorded. He is mentioned briefly, without many details about his life. Even so, his role as a liberator of Israel raises some questions about his origin and history. What we know about him is summarized in this verse. After him came Shamgar, son of Anath, who killed 600 Philistines with an ox goad, and he too liberated Israel. The name Shamgar has an uncertain origin. Some scholars believe it may have come from a Hurrian name found in ancient texts from a city called Nuzi in Mesopotamia. However, most agree that the name Shamgar is not Israelite, which suggests he may not have been born a Hebrew. When he's called the son of Anath, this probably does not refer to the name of his father, as was common in the Bible, but rather to his geographical origin. Some scholars think he may have come from a city called Banath, located in the territory of the tribe of Naphtali. This city was dominated by the men of Naphtali, but its inhabitants were not completely expelled. Another possibility is that Shamgar came from a settlement north of Hebron, mentioned in the book of Joshua, chapter 15, verse 59. Since the Bible does not make clear Shamgar's ethnic origin or tribe, some scholars believe he could have been a Canaanite who ended up serving Israel. This theory is supported by those who note that the name Anath may be linked to the Canaanite goddess of war, who was worshipped in Ugarit and Egypt. However, despite this theory, it presents some difficulties, mainly because it would be strange for a judge and liberator of Israel to be associated with a pagan deity. Nonetheless, it is possible that the title Son of Anath was given by the Canaanites, or even by Israelites who mixed their beliefs due to Shamgar's fame as a warrior, something like Son of Battle. Another idea is that Son of Anath was not a personal name or a reference to a place, but rather a military title. There is Egyptian and Canaanite evidence indicating that Son of Anath could have been the name of a military group, suggesting that Shamgar might have been a mercenary soldier. Regardless of Shamgar's origin, what we know is that he lived in difficult times, full of oppression and insecurity. In Deborah's song, in Judges chapter 5, it is said that, in Shamgar's time, the roads were dangerous, journeys were interrupted by thieves, and many villages were abandoned, as people preferred to hide in fortified cities. This shows the atmosphere of fear and violence caused by the pressure of the Philistines, who, even at the beginning of their presence in Israel, were already disrupting trade and travel routes. The biblical text suggests that Shamgar faced a dangerous and organized enemy, but even so, he had a courageous and surprising attitude. Using an ox goad, a simple farming tool with an iron tip, he managed to kill 600 Philistines in a single attack. Some theories suggest that ox goad may have a symbolic meaning or even be the name of a ship, implying that Shamgar could have been a naval commander who led an offensive, perhaps in alliance with Ramses II. However, this idea has no clear evidence and goes against the simpler biblical description, which shows him as a man fighting on land with a common agricultural tool. Another issue that generates discussion is the length of time Shamgar led Israel. Unlike more famous judges like Gideon or Deborah, who brought deliverance for a longer time, it seems that Shamgar had a very short period of leadership. The oppression of the tribes of Israel continued until the time of Deborah and Barak, leading some to believe that Shamgar's leadership was limited. However, his victory may have helped pave the way for the conquests of the tribe of Naphtali against the Canaanites. Even though Shamgar may not have been an Israelite, and there are those who believe this, God used him to deliver Israel, even if for a short time. In the end, what truly matters in the biblical account is not where Shamgar came from or details about his origin, but the fact that God, in his sovereignty, chose an unlikely person to bring deliverance to his people. The lack of details about Shamgar's origin and the curious fact that he used an ox goad as a weapon lead many scholars to believe that he was not a professional warrior, but probably a simple man, perhaps a farmer who lived under the constant threat of the Philistines. This is, in fact, the most accepted theory, and if it's true, it makes Shamgar's story even more impressive because without military training, he took what he had, a simple farming tool, and with God's help, defeated an enemy army. The ox goad that Shamgar used was basically a long stick between 2.5 and 3 meters with an iron tip at the end. It was a simple tool used by farmers to guide oxen during work on the land, not a weapon of war. This makes Shamgar's story even more special. God doesn't need great resources or extraordinary skills to accomplish his purposes. He can use even the simplest tools, as he did with Moses and his staff in Egypt, or with Shamgar and his ox goad, to overcome great challenges. What truly stands out in this story is not Shamgar's skill as a warrior, but the power of God working through him. The ox goad became a powerful weapon in Shamgar's hands because he was being guided and empowered by God. And here comes a question: what led Shamgar to face 600 armed enemies with a simple farming tool? The answer lies in the trust he had in God. This courage did not come from self-confidence, but from an absolute faith in divine power. After all, trusting in oneself and trusting in God are very different things. It doesn't matter if Shamgar was a simple peasant, a skilled soldier, an Israelite, or a Canaanite. What truly matters is that he knew that, on his own, there was no way he could defeat 600 Philistines. But instead of focusing on his limitations, he trusted in God's power to save his people. Shamgar's story shows us an important truth about God. He doesn't need status, wealth, or special skills to carry out his plans. If Shamgar was a farmer, then he was an ordinary person. If he were a warrior from outside Israel, then he wasn't part of the right lineage. Even so, Shamgar rose up with faith and obedience, and God used him to do something great. This teaches us that God accomplishes great things in unexpected ways, using people and resources we often don't even imagine. He is not limited by our expectations or human logic. His power is infinite, and he acts in surprising ways to deliver us. The greatest example of this is the cross of Christ. Who would have thought that the humiliating death of the Son of God would be the means by which we would be saved? How could someone who was punished and crucified be the Lord and Savior? This seems absurd to many, but to those who believe, it is the power of God. God, in his wisdom, chose the unlikely to bring about the greatest victory of all, even though it seems like madness to the world. One of the lessons that Shamgar's story teaches us is that we should not underestimate what we have in hand. In Shamgar's time, it's possible that the Philistines had taken away the weapons of the Israelites, as they often did with the peoples they dominated. Even so, Shamgar did not wait to get a sword or a weapon of war to act. He also did not complain about the lack of resources, nor did he use that as an excuse to do nothing. On the contrary, he used what he had, a simple ox goad, and with it, he defeated the Philistines. The story of David against Goliath is similar. David did not use the weapons of a soldier, but the tools of a shepherd, a staff, a sling, and 5 stones, trusting that God would fight for him. Both Shamgar and David knew that victory did not depend on their own abilities, but on the power of God working through them. This teaches us that God can use us, regardless of our limitations or the difficulties we face. The important thing is to offer him what we have, even if it seems little, because God can transform even the simplest things into something great for his glory. Shamgar's story offers us a powerful lesson about how God acts in unexpected ways and uses even the simplest resources to accomplish great feats. Often when we find ourselves in difficult situations, our tendency is to focus on what we lack, on our limitations, or on the challenges around us. But Shamgar teaches us that, even in the face of scarce resources and powerful enemies, what truly matters is the faith and courage to trust that God can do the impossible with what we have in hand. If we had to describe Shamgar with a single adjective, that adjective would be courageous. But it's important to understand that Shamgar's courage did not come from self-confidence. He was not self-sufficient, nor did he see himself as an invincible hero. His courage was born from a deep trust in God. Shamgar knew that on his own he had no chance against an army of 600 armed Philistines. Humanly speaking, he was at a total disadvantage. His enemies were numerous, organized and well-equipped, while he, besides being alone, had only a farming tool, which could hardly be called a weapon. Even so, when the time to act came, Shamgar did not hide. He was not paralyzed by fear or doubt. Instead, he faced the situation with faith and confidence in God's power. He understood that no matter how unfavorable the situation seemed, God could use his simple ox goad to bring about a great victory, and that is exactly what happened. What Shamgar did was not merely a physical battle, but a demonstration that, when we trust in God, he can turn what seems impossible into a triumph. Shamgar's courage challenges us to reflect on how we face our own challenges. Many times, we find ourselves in situations where we feel small or incapable without the resources we think we need to succeed. But like Shamgar, we must remember that our trust should not be in our strength or abilities, but in God. True courage is not the absence of fear, but the willingness to act with faith, even when circumstances seem to be against us. Moreover, Shamgar shows us that God doesn't need great things to do great works. He doesn't always choose the most prepared or those with the best tools. On the contrary, God often acts in unexpected ways, using ordinary people and simple resources to demonstrate his glory. Shamgar's story is a powerful reminder that what truly matters is not the resources we have, but how much we trust in God to multiply and use them for the greater good. In our own lives, when we face struggles, challenges, or seemingly impossible situations, we can learn from Shamgar. It is up to us to respond with faith and courage, believing that, just as Shamgar defeated an army with an ox goad, God can also enable us to win our battles, no matter how unprepared we may feel. All we need to do is trust in him, take what we have, and move forward with courage. Did Shamgar feel fear? Probably yes, after all. He was human like any of us. But what matters is that in the Bible, true courage does not mean being without fear. True courage is acting with faith, even when we feel insecure or unprepared. Many of the great heroes of faith recognized their limitations, but still they fully trusted in God to win their battles. A clear example of this is the Apostle Paul. He understood this lesson well when God told him that his grace was sufficient and that his power was made perfect in weakness. With this, Paul began to take pride in his weaknesses because he knew that in them, Christ's power worked even more strongly. Now write in the comments, if you already knew the story of Shamgar in the Bible, leave a like on the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the upcoming videos. May God bless you.